right, the goals for today's session is to refine our visions and goals for grading. We're going to work on learning from one another's experiences and discuss the plan for next time. We're going to start off with some introductions, do some feedback from session one, discuss the homework that we gave out, refine our purpose for grading, and work through a problem of practice around grading. We're going to keep the same norms that we had last time, but be respectful to other folks. Make sure that you equitably allow all voices to be heard and all ideas are valuable, and that we learn together as we go towards our common goals. Engagements requests. Plan each month. We'll ask you to do some reading, thinking, practicing, and how you might implement this. So we'll be giving you a little bit of homework each time. Try to participate each month. The value of the PLC is an investment in each other and ourselves, because as you continue to work with other folks here, you build relationships, and that allows us to learn from each other. Try to respect each other. We have our own lived experiences, and we're all welcome here, and engage in the safe space to kind of learn about grading, because sometimes grading can be a little awkward. Try to move this down. Nope, I cannot move it down. If I do that. Oh, there we go.
Andrea, I'm just going to interrupt for a second. Hey, folks that are just joining us, I'm going to put the link for the slides in to the chat. And then also we will we'll be dropping the attendance link in like midway through and then again at the end. So no worries if you've missed it. It will be coming.
Right, so on our PLC timeline, we're still in the September-October frame of purpose of grading, the foundations of equitable grading. Next time, we'll be moving into rubrics for feedback and communication. In January, February, we'll be going into motivating students, then multiple opportunities and shifting our paradigm. So from our feedback from session one, we have a good mix of folks here from urban, suburban, rural, and a little bit of small towns. We didn't discuss how we should bring up a district-wide purpose of grading in our district, and that's something we can talk about some more. What worked well the last time was breakout rooms. The key takeaways people felt were that thinking about why of grading is more challenging than people thought. And there are many districts that don't have a clear policy on grading, and it doesn't always match with classroom practices. So that's an important thing for us to kind of think about how to deal with that. And the challenge and necessity of aligning the purpose of grades and practices in our classrooms seems obvious, but making it clear is where the work is. All right. We gave you homework last time to think about ungrading. And the reason we gave you that ungrading is just to think about how there are aspects from the ungrading movement that we might be able to use in our equitable grading process. So one of the things we want to think about is, why do people ungrade? And this relates back to a lot of the pieces of equitable grading, is that grades are not always a good incentive and incentivize often the wrong things. I know Joe Feldman talks in his book about how grading homework often causes people to want to copy homework. And I have experienced that as well. Those grades aren't good feedback. A letter A, B, or C doesn't tell you how to get better, versus writing down that you need someone to work on how to write a conclusion, or think about how to graph better, or collect data in a better way, is a better substantial communication that leads students to what they can focus on in order to improve what they're doing. Grades are not good markers of learning. There are people in my classroom now that walked in knowing how to do the work that we're teaching, and so giving them an A doesn't say that they learned anything. And there are other students who walk in and they don't know much at all, and by the end of the year they've learned a lot, and that grade may not indicate that. And sometimes grades encourage competitiveness over collaboration, because they want to be the person with an A and someone else has a different grade. It depends on people's view of those grades. The ungrading movement is really more about sort of trusting students, and that we're trying to compassionately be fair to our students. So we have these sort of grade-free zones where you get peer feedback, teacher feedback, and use that to sort of figure out what you've learned and where we go. The assessments tend to be more authentic in the things that I've read or people I've talked to who've done ungrading. They wind up with a small mini conference with students around the rubric where they talk about, what do you think you've done? How do you think you've performed against this rubric? And the student comes up with this list of ideas, the teacher comes up with a list of ideas, and they collaborate together to talk about what that grade could look like. And that gets back into sort of this contract grading idea, because you've told them what they need to do. They've looked at how much of it they've done, and together you sort of figure out what the grade should be on their transcript. A lot of times it works really well with portfolios so that you can have work that's not tests, but more performance based. And because the students are intimately involved in it, they're busy making sort of the rubrics. They're deciding with you what is valuable in learning, what this works, what an A or a B or a C means. From what I have read, a lot of people feel it's that piece of it about the student-made rubrics works better with upperclassmen than with lowerclassmen. So like your juniors and seniors are a little bit more able to do that. Freshmen, it's more like this is where we need to be, and maybe start with 1-point rubrics to get them used to this idea of what does it look like and how do they have impact on what that looks like. It allows students versus us having to do all the work of what that looks like. But it does require, in my understanding, more time than doing some sort of equitable grading, because all the people I've talked to, they end up at the end of the year having to have these personal conversations about, this is what you look, this is what I came, this is what we came up together. I do like the parts around, however, having those conversations. And the way that I sort of build it into my classroom is that I have those conversations about, this is what I think a grade should be, and then I work it into it, but I don't have very private conversations with folks about it. I sort of have more of a public conversation about what is the rubric, where is it, why is it this way? And that's a little bit easier in some classes than others. It's easier for me in a science class than a math class, for example. So having a conversation about, this is what the rubric means to me, let's all decide and grade and calibrate ourselves on what a rubric would be and what proficient looks like. I've been able to do that some in science, but I haven't been able to do it as much in math. If you want more information about this, so there's other pieces you can steal for ungrading. I would recommend going through the curated collection from Joanna Brown about it and sort of look at the accountability document. So the idea behind this was just to give you another perspective that could influence what you think about as far as what equitable grading could look like, and see if there's some good stuff you can steal from that in your classroom. Are there any questions about this before we move on? You can unmute or put them in the chat.
I have a question. I have a student who like doesn't care about grades, but only is like, well, he's basically obsessed with credit. So every single assignment, he's like, how much credit will this give me? And then he does some math and sees if it's worth him to like get it, like do it for a certain amount of points and stuff. So do you have any like advice on that? Or is that just like a totally different subject, like credits versus grades?
Well, credits tends to feed into the point-based system. Go ahead, Christy.
I just want to ask a clarifying question. What does the student mean by credits? Like credits towards graduation?
Exactly.
Or, but the whole, it's not like
he
one
wants 24
assignment.
credits, so
Right, but But it's not like the assignment earns credits towards
Well, I guess like
graduation,
an
right?
English class or something, like if, I guess like maybe she gives 900 points of assignments, but if he gets like 500 points worth of it, he gets the 0.25 or 5.50 for the class, which is like credit.
But that's kind of moving back towards that point-based system and away from equitable grading as a whole.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree.
And that's the
So
whole,
that's why I
that's the
was
whole
like,
problem.
yeah, I mean, it seems like a problem. I mean, in a way, so every single day, kind of, I have to like talk with them about it, you know,
Right.
uh, even map testing right now, he's only gonna do it if he gets credit, which I guess the director at our school is gonna kind of like give kids like credit for taking the test. Not sure, but it's all new right now, but.
Interesting.
That's actually part of the reason why I wanted to move away originally from, the point-based system to equitable grading, is that in doing so, it stopped some of the conversation around credit and turned it back to, well, you get credit when you've learned this thing. So how have you demonstrated that you've learned this piece? Christy, you were going to add something?
Well, I was going to add something, and then I just saw in the chat that someone said, tell him, yeah, it's for credit. I love that. What was I going to say? I think it's a similar question when, even if you are a fully standards-based classroom, the question just morphs, right? And it changes into, is this summative or is this formative, right? The kids want to know that. And so I've tried to frame it as like everything that we do, anything that I ask you to do is building towards you being able to show me that you understand the material, right? So while this isn't going to have a mark that goes in the grade book, it does relate to our summative assignment. And so not doing it might not hurt you right in this not hurt you, but might not impact you right in this moment, but it will have a significant impact when it comes to summative time. So I think part of our job is also helping kids see the connection between formative and summative work, because ultimately when they go to college or, some future beyond high school, and there's a high stakes test, and if they don't have multiple opportunities and supplied formative assessment, they're going to have to build it in themselves, right? And so I do feel like that's part of our job as teachers, especially later on in high school, is we need to show them how to make their own formative assessment. How do you check to know whether you're getting it or not, right? Because there isn't always going to be someone there handing you formative things and checking your work. Like eventually, likely when you go to college, there's going to be less of that, or at least that was certainly true in my experience. Maybe tides are changing and there's more of that in college. I hope so. But if there's not, how do students help themselves? Right. So that's not a great answer for.
No, I did like that answer. The way you framed it was like perfect.
Oh, great. Okay. I was going to say it's not a great answer for dealing with it, your student today, right? But part of it is that development of this part of the brain and helping them understand their own metacognition. Like, how do I, if I don't get it right now, how do I help myself get it? And all of this pre-work and this formative work actually does matter in the long run, even if there's not a mark going in the grade book. So does anyone have anything to add to what you might say to the student? Because I feel like we're hearing this more and more and more. Like, is this formative? Is this summative? Does this count? How many points is this? Things like that. Just wondering. We did have a couple. I love that one. Tell them, yeah, it's just for credit. Yeah, it is. Do it.
I'm gonna unshare for a second, or go back and stop sharing so that we can kind of have a little more of this conversation if people want to say any more about it.
And I'll just add, I'm a special education teacher who helps kids in each subject. So I think for example, this student has an IEP. He doesn't have autism, but some of my students with autism, like, I think they hyper focus. So, and then he's like, he needs reading and writing help, but he's super good at math. So then he's throwing all these points and numbers at me. And I'm like, well, let's walk over to the English teacher and double check with her. So
Gotcha.
yeah, but I'm like, please, let's just move away from counting points and stuff and do this
Totally.
tree together. So,
Totally.
you know,
Did you say that you are the special education teacher or the
I am,
special
yeah.
ed? You are, okay.
So I push into
I
like
want-
science, math, English.
Totally, yes. Yes, I was also wondering about that hyper focus. And I don't, you guys weigh in on this, but I wonder if saying kind of like the person did in the chat, yes, this is credit, and it's one piece of credit out of 1,000 pieces that we're gonna do. You know, so like it's worth a really tiny amount in terms of their number fixation. And does that mean it's worth doing? Yes, I don't know.
Well,
I
and there's the idea that like, hey, it's experiential, and this experience is going to be on the test that is for credit. So it's having this experience so that you know how to talk about it on a test.
I think it's also trying to speak to their intrinsic side is good also. So what is it that this student is particularly interested in about science? Can you make a connection to what you're learning about right now and help them see the connection between, well, we have to understand this before we can understand this, before we can understand this, right? Like we're building the pieces so that we get the bigger picture in the end. And student, this connects to what you were talking about the other day about why, you know, finding some intrinsic piece for why they want to know it. Why would we care about knowing it? Why does this student, why in particular, why would they want to know it? Because sometimes speaking to, well, it's going to be on the summative exam, you know, some kids are like, I don't care, right? I need the intrinsic side. I need the big picture motivator. Why would I want to know? So,
and I think that feeds right into what it says in the chat about you know, some students are not bought into school. School is like a little game, and you collect points and then you go up levels, right? Versus
that does sound
trying
like him, actually, Andrea. That's true. He loves culinary, and his number one goal is to get his driver's license. So we're trying to. Yeah, as
oh, I like it. Got it. I like what Jeremy said too. We're also fighting against years of training and conditioning that points percentage is what matters the most. 100% agree with that. 100%. There I am using a percent, but yes, completely agree with that. And I think that's true anytime we start to make shifts in our classroom. If we aren't feeling, if the shifts aren't happening all around us, in a larger effort, if we're kind of in isolation, then we're fighting against that. When we have more systematic shifts, there are still pushbacks, but if we're all doing it, you know, it's I think we tend to get more buy-in.
All right, I'm going to go back to the slides now. That was a great conversation. Thanks for bringing that up. Because that kind of leads right into why we needed this purpose for grades and how it helps us guide our actions and those conversations we have with students. So let's go into practices at our schools. So here is our grade book. What grade should each student receive? We're going to ask you to look at these grades and go into the Jamboard. So I'm going to go ahead and show the Jamboard now. And here in this Jamboard, you can see that there are these 4 students, Karen, Alex, Jennifer, Stephen. And we're going to consider the grades for those students, what grade each student should reserve, whether it's accurate, and then have a little conversation about what did this exercise bring up for you. Now, oops, I went to the wrong place. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment because my computer has decided I need to re-log in. So in a minute, we're going to go ahead and put you in a breakout room so you can have some of this conversation with some folks with you. And you can look at the grades in the Jamboard. We'll drop the Jamboard in the chat. And if you don't already have it, and we'll go ahead and put folks into breakout rooms for a few minutes to kind of look that over. I'm going to make those breakout rooms now. Make sure that you get a chance to, introduce yourself to folks for a minute. Say hi, how are things going for you? And then go look at the Jamboard. Any questions before I send you off to breakout rooms? Okay, I'll give you about 5 or 10 minutes to look at that, and we'll let you know when we're bringing you back.
Hi, Jay. Hi, Kathleen. Are you guys able to find breakout rooms? Is that showing up for you? We're not able to move them, right, Andrea? They are.
Yeah, they're assigned a room. I can't just put them in there. I can try to move them to another room, but I don't know if it makes them actually go there. I could try.
I don't think it makes them actually go there.
I don't think so.
I'm going to pause the recording.
Welcome back. So does anybody want to share out? I noticed people didn't get a chance to put things on the Jamboard beyond it's hard to know what's going on without knowing what the assessments are measuring. Somebody want to unmute and tell us about like what you thought about that experience and what you thought about some of the conversations that you had?
I can go.
Yeah.
One thing that I really wondered right off the get-go is, do these assessments build on each other? Do they reassess some of the old things from the first tests? Like especially Karen missed the first 3 tests, just got fat goose eggs, but then 90s on the rest of them. Was there anything from those first 3 assessments that was reassessed that, she should have that grade altered because she shows proficiency now? And to a lesser extent, some of the other ones too.
No, that's a great question. And I know a lot with I know it's chemistry, it does seem to like continually build, like you can't do reactions if you don't understand atoms. I'm not sure that that's the case with all of the sciences, but definitely that's a great question. Any other thoughts that people have?
I can go. One of the wonderings that I had, I'm a SPED teacher at Grant High School, and I was curious, like those test scores looked a lot to me like the kiddo who had a consistent 63, like maybe he's been pinned for SPED but hasn't actually received an IEP yet. Maybe he's not getting the support he needs quite yet, but to see like no growth over time would be a huge red flag for me. But how would the shift in like a teacher's grading policy of like dropping your lowest test score positively impact those students' averages? As well. I see some teachers do that and some teachers don't. And then generally we just kind of talked about the mess that can be like individual teacher grading practices at our sites.
Sounds great. All right. right. Those were some great conversations. And I know that there were lots of other conversations about specific schools and different grades. I'm going to go ahead and go back to sharing my screen for the slideshow. The part of the reason we did that was to kind of think about how that, I'm gonna go back, that some of those questions we ask and some other guidance of what we should give as far as grades comes back to the purpose of grading that we have. Like, what is our goal in the grading? Here are the purposes of grading that we put in the homework for people to think about. And we also included the purpose of grading that people had. So grading is to give feedback to students so they can take charge of their learning and provide information to all who support the students, teachers, special educators, parents, and others. Grading is used to evaluate and provide feedback on student work. That way, instructors communicate to students how they're performing in the course and where they need more help to achieve course's goals. Purpose of grading is clear communication with students, product, process, and progress so that maximum learning and achievement may be accomplished. And grades reflect how well students have met the established learning goals in the class, areas of outstanding performance, and areas where additional effort is required. So thinking about those and thinking about the purpose of grading you guys came up with. Let's go back to that Jamboard. I'm going to put you back in your rooms for another 5 minutes to like share your thoughts about how the purposes of grading that you guys came up with, as well as the purpose of grading from those other sources, helps you answer some of the questions about what you might want to do to figure out what grades are, how you might want to communicate that with other people. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to put you back in your breakout rooms for another few minutes to have those conversations and go back to Jamboard 3. And this time, just add your comments on that Jamboard for what you think about that. Any questions before I open all the rooms? Well, they're already open. If you have any questions, stick around for a minute. Otherwise, head off to the breakout rooms again. You're with the same people. Instead of how do I get all of these points together? Yeah, so those are some great conversations and points that we're going. Christy, so I'm going to hand it over to you now. You are muted, Christy. So if you would unmute Christy, that'd be great. Thanks.
Got it. Thank you. All right. So
Christy, you're sharing your whole screen instead of the slideshow.
Yes. Okay. Give me one second. I'm just trying to find the right one here. So
okay.
We left off here. Yep. Slide 3. Okay, great. Slideshow. Thank you. Okay, here we are. So last time, your groups put together a draft of a purpose of grading statement. And then you just got back from Jamboard where you were thinking a little bit about thoughts or questions or ideas you had about how does your purpose of grading statement help you address questions that come up about grading. So we just shared a couple of those out. So nationally, when teachers were asked about what they thought the purpose of grades were, their responses were all collected and seemed to fall in about 6 categories, right? So the reasons that they gave seemed to all fall in about 6 categories. So the categories, we're starting with to communicate information about student achievement to families and others, right? And I feel like a lot of you said that in your purpose statement, right? We're trying to communicate information. But additionally, to provide information to students for self-evaluation. Okay, love that. To select, identify, or group students for specific education paths or programs. This is kind of what we talked about in session 1. Like, what are the built-in systemic things in your school or district that really require certain grades from students in order to participate? So this is kind of falling in that category. to evaluate the effectiveness of instructional programs. So we're trying to figure out if our tag program is useful. What kind of grades are our tag students getting, or our AP program, or whatever, right? So we're using grades to do that. We're providing, so there's that extrinsic reward, right? We're providing incentives for students to learn. And then, you know, that one bugs me a lot, because it's like, it's not learning for the joy of learning. It's learning because we get a grade for it, right? We get some extrinsic reward for it. And then to provide evidence of students' effort or responsibility. So we're talking a little bit about behavior there, right? So again, nationally, teachers were asked, what do they think the purpose of grades are? And their responses kind of fell into these 6 categories. So then I got a little curious and wanted to look around a little bit about what are some examples of statements that districts are putting out there. So here's some examples from different districts. And so I'll give you a second just to read that. What are some key words that you're seeing in there that seem good to include? To bring up my chat box. Inform, great, awesome, thank you. Progress, great. Any more that you're seeing? You're like, oh, those are good things to include. Inform, guide improvements, good. How they can get better. I like learning goals. I like that in there, right? We have something to shoot for. So how are we doing with respect to what we're aiming at? When needed. Yep. So if improvements are needed, yeah, that is an interesting thing to include in the learning successes. Awesome. Okay. Here's another one. Now, how do we feel like this one compares? I'm not sure whose improvements are being guided when needed, the school teacher or the student, based on this statement. Laura, are you talking about the first one or the second one?
Yeah, I was just, when the person said when needed is kind of funny. I just went back.
Oh yeah, gotcha.
And I was like, yeah, I'm
Gotcha.
not sure what they mean by that either.
Do they? Yeah, that's a good point. Whose improvements are being guided when needed? Yeah, that's good.
I like how Jessica points out that learning successes is in the first one, and there's no success in the second one.
Unless we call areas of outstanding performance a success, they kind of break it out there, what we're doing well at and what we need maybe more support with. So they're saying in our purpose for grading, we're kind of calling out both of those things. It's interesting that they're specifically including instructors' evaluations. I mean, it is, right? But it's, I don't know, just interesting that they're calling that out specifically. The second one feels more like curriculum and content are imposed and how well the student molded themselves to the desired outcome of the teacher, like how well the student performed. Interesting. Yeah, I see that. The focus shifts a little bit. Met the established, effort are required. Love it. But learning goals of each class, that seems like each class and each teacher can grade in a different way. Shouldn't there be some measurement that is standard or something like how we evaluate a student learning, say algebra? Yep. Yeah, I don't know if they're trying to say that, you know, because they're different contents, then they'll have different goals. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay. Last one. Let's look at this one. The primary purpose of grading is to effectively communicate student achievement towards specific standards at a certain point in time. A grade should reflect what a student knows and is able to do. Students will receive separate feedback and evaluation on their learning habits, which will not be included in the academic achievement grades. So really calling out here that we are separating academics and behavior. And while one may influence the other, we are reporting on them separately. There's some just straight up statements here that I like. A grade should reflect what a student knows and is able to do. Boom. Right? That's the purpose of grading, right? Is that we are establishing what the student knows and is able to do. I also like this, Jeremy, a certain point in time. It's not permanent. It's not their forever understanding. It's what it is right now at this moment. I kind of love that also, right? It's leaving it open-ended. It can change. It can grow. So, okay, so there's 3 examples. This one indicates pre-assessment and benchmark data to inform growth. Jessica, are you saying that because of the certain point in time? Is that what's kind of indicating that for you?
Yeah, it all seems highly individualized to me, that they're like seeing where students are and then where they wind up, and then there's
Right.
individualized feedback provided as well.
Yeah, I like that individualized piece because it feels more personal, right? It feels like my goals, my progress, how I'm doing right now. Personally, I like the one in orange the best. It feels like the clearest to me in terms of the intention behind the grading.
And I think that
wanted
the 3 examples that you highlighted also bring out one of the conversations that was happening in room 1, which was, hey, when you have a good purpose of grading, like the one in orange, it's really easy to see like, oh, I'm communicating with, I'm doing this, I'm keeping my things separate. And when you have one that's a little more convoluted, like the one in blue, then it gets a little, there was a lot of discussion about what does this really mean? What are we really doing? Does this mean everybody can have their own grade? So that a purpose of grading can either guide you if it's well written, or it can be distracting and interfering if it's poorly written.
and
So
bring
thanks
up
for
more
bringing
questions, right? And
Yeah.
bring up more questions. So yes, the kind of clear, definitive statements I think are really useful, especially for families who may, have less experience with grades and grading, or not sure how to articulate that. I think the clearer our statements are, the more impactful they are. I wanted to share, this is from my own district. This is the Beaverton School District. And every time there's a report card, which is 4 times a year, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, we have a cover letter on the report card. And it, in the cover letter, establishes what the purpose for grading is. So it's the same statement every time, but here's the format of it. So this is what it literally looks like, how it's written on our cover letter. So again, we're communicating a student's academic achievement or progress towards established district learning targets. So they're not, they're not changed from semester to semester. They're not at the whim of the teacher. They are established, agreed upon district learning targets. We're separately reporting on behavior, and we're indicating areas of strength and where additional time is needed. The letter grade for each subject or course is based on student academic achievement or progress toward established district learning targets. Behavior marks are not included in the letter grade. So to me, what's missing from this is at a particular point in time. I especially like that phrase. I would love to see that on here. But it gets at strengths and weaknesses, separating academics from behavior, establish learning targets, like kind of these key features of standards-based grading, right? So I just wanted to share that with you. I know we spent a little bit of time in session 1 looking around for, does our district have a statement of grading? Some people found something and some people couldn't find anything about their district. So,
And
if
one
you're
thing I want to
thinking of-
add with that
Mhm.
is that if you're a person in your district who is trying to move to equitable grading and the rest of your district isn't, you can steal this idea of send a letter home that includes the purpose of grading, maybe as an email, or bring it out during that back to school night, or bring it to your parent teacher conferences so you can remind teachers, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, and this is how your letter grade looks, so that they always get that, oh yeah, that's what this means. And here's an example of it that Christy's going to show you now.
Yeah, I was going to say right along the lines of what Andrea is saying, you can send a separate letter home. You can include it on your syllabus. So on the left side there is an excerpt from a syllabus where the teacher is explaining their grading philosophy. And that's just a small portion of it. If you actually click on that section, like if I click on that, oops, well, I'm going to click on it. It takes you to the entire syllabus, right? So here's the whole thing. And then what's not captured on the slide are the rest of the steps. Like, what does that mean to us as people in this classroom? Here's what it will look like. So you can click on that to see more. You can also write out what it means to get an A, what it means, like define it for your classroom, or better yet, define it in collaboration with your students. What does it mean? Everyone in this room, let's decide together. What does it mean to have an A in here? What does it mean to have a B? Write that out. It's like a contract that you're writing with students. Share that with families so that they know too. Here are some examples of pieces of evidence that you can collect to help you know where the student is. There's one at the end of a unit. There's one at the end of a reflection. Here's another way that you can explain it to families. Really, I think at the end of the day, it's if the students understand that you are in collaboration with them and we're all on the same side, we all want the same thing, and that is for you to learn the most and do the very best that you can. And I'm here to support you, right? And here's what that is going to look like in this classroom. I feel like people can get behind almost anything if they understand the motives and they understand how it works, right? It's when it's nebulous, black boxy, waving, hand waving behind the curtain that they start to get nervous about that, and then start to push back a little bit about that. So I think just clarity, clear statements, be really transparent about what's happening. I feel like people can get behind almost anything. Anyone want to jump in, add anything? Can speak or put it in the chat, or have some ideas anyway for if you're wanting to put together a grading statement for yourself. Hopefully you have some ideas moving forward. If you want to compose your own, I think there's several examples here. It's just kind of, what is your philosophy? What do you want to emphasize? Things like that. I like this. Thanks, Laura. All right, so I want to talk about what we're doing next, and this is my favorite protocol ever. I really like the problem of practice. And in a nutshell, what it is there is someone in the group, in your breakout room, who's going to be the person who shares a problem that they're experiencing in their room. This week, it happens to be around grades and purpose of grading. But they self-identified, like, I've got something I'd like to share. So they share out the problem. They share out the problem. They're called the presenter. So they're going to take just a couple of minutes and share out what the problem is. The rest of the folks in the breakout room are called consultants. And for the next couple of minutes, they're just asking clarifying questions. They just want to make sure that they fully understand what the dilemma is. And then the meat of it here, well, I guess the next part's the meat, building up to the meat of it. The consultants then ask probing questions. So these are a little bit more in depth, asking the presenter to think a little bit differently about the issue. They're not making any suggestions. They're just kind of, probing a little bit deeper. And then the whole group discusses the dilemma. And here's the meat of it, right? This is where most of the time is. So people are analyzing the dilemma, making suggestions, helping the presenter kind of think through some possibilities, ways to manage it or tackle it. Then the presenter takes a couple of minutes to summarize what they heard and how their thinking is maybe different, things they're going to try. And then there's a facilitator. The facilitator leads a brief conversation that allows the group to reflect on the process. And that's just a couple of minutes. I would also ask that, let's see, yeah, facilitators right up here. Facilitator keeps the time, and that's really important. The protocol runs really well if we are kind of mindful of time and managing the time, because then we get to all the pieces. It's great if we can have a full work through the entire protocol instead of like, oh, we ran out of time because we kind of blended parts 2 and 3 together, right? If you can be mindful about each section, it really kind of brings that problem of practice like kind of full circle. So we've got presenter, we've got facilitator, and then we've got our consultants who are doing the asking of questions and then ultimately making some suggestions. So this is a powerful protocol. I've walked away with so many things to think about. It's really valuable actually to be the presenter. You're taking a risk. I'll be very real about that. You're taking a risk in front of people that you don't know very well, but it can be very powerful with what you walk away with. So just something to think about. Thinking about you and your group, what role do you want to play as we head into the breakout rooms? So we've already kind of done A and B. So think about who's the presenter. Facilitator is going to keep the time, work through the steps, and then be prepared to share out a little bit. We don't have to, if people want to kind of maintain a little privacy, that's fine too. We can just speak kind of generally about
Christy,
what we learned about. Yes.
I want to tell you that in the
time.
process of all the conversation that we had around purpose of grading, it's now 5:52.
Oh my God. Should we go do a small version of it and come back after I just said how important it is that we do all the pieces? What do you think?
Those of you who are online, can you guys vote with maybe like a thumbs up or a thumbs down as to whether or not you want to just do a quick
Andrea.
version or just do it next time?
I almost wonder if you could pick 4 people in this big group and we could kind of watch how it's done.
Oh, that's a great
Right?
idea.
Is anybody willing to share a problem of practice?
I like it.
I could do one.
Oh, thank you, Bryce.
Here we go.
All right, I'm gonna keep some time. Ready,
okay.
go.
So I'm teaching patterns physics and then 3 different math classes, algebra 1, geometry, and algebra 2. In algebra 2 specifically, we are going way slower than the other classes, where there is this refresher at the beginning of the curriculum that is basically a recap on algebra 1, talking about transformations and stuff. And they've had such a hard time with it that the entire first quarter has basically been trying to get these transformations and just modeling linear functions figured out. And so we have almost nothing in the grade book because this is the only thing that we've been doing. And some of the students are still struggling with it. And there's lots of behavior issues. There's lots of emotional needs in that class. And it's been kind of chaotic. And so some of the students figured it out week 1 and have been bored to death. And the other ones haven't. In terms of grading, there's very few things in the grade book because it's taking so long. And I'm kind of deciding to just move on so that we have other things. So just by sheer statistical, getting some other things in the grade book that might help them bring their grades up a little bit. But man, it is a weird experience that I've had this first quarter with just that one class. The other 2 classes, we've been able to keep the momentum going, but that one has been tough.
Awesome. Thank you, Bryce. All right, let's do some clarifying questions.
Have you considered putting like temporary grades in for things that people are doing at all, with the idea that you would replace them later?
Temporary grades like
Like
for
you
like
do a formative
assignments.
yeah, like you do a
Hmm.
formative assessment and then say like, I'll replace this later when we go on. Have you done anything like that?
Kind of. I've mostly just done it as a quiz, and they can kind of retake that quiz, like a formative quiz, not a full test, but in that way, yeah. Amy?
How much would it negatively affect them if they moved on? Would they not be able to do the later content?
I don't think so, because I think it's kind of trying to hit a few different things at the same time. Like if they don't fully understand what the transformations are, they probably will still be able to do like solving systems of linear equations if they can understand it. I think the next couple things aren't necessarily fully dependent on it. I think it's just kind of the background. This is why things work, and they're really struggling with that. But I think they could probably make their way forward without it.
Awesome. How about some suggestions for Bryce?
I have a suggestion. Sorry, I
Yeah.
feel like I've done one of these
That'd be
before,
great.
so I feel like I'm more like in tuned. But how about reteaching in the warm-ups? Like do a problem every day in the warm-up of this topic that they're struggling with, but moving on, so you can at least get some new stuff in and they can feel successful with something. And then every day just kind of have a similar question of the stuff they're struggling with, and then do like 10 minutes a day of reteach.
Yeah, I like that.
Building on that, I've seen it be successful to give something in the warm up and then say the first person who gets it right puts it on the board. And then those people who have got it are up or on the board explaining how they do it. And then the students hear it from a different voice in a different way on how to think through the problem. And that might trigger them to understand it better.
I like that. Yeah. I've tried that a couple
There's
of times,
all-
trying to get the students up there teaching the rest of the class how to do it.
Are they resistant?
A couple of them are okay with it.
Yeah.
That class in particular is like
Nice.
really divided. There's kind of two
Yeah.
factions. It's a small town,
Yeah.
so they've known each
Yeah.
other since kindergarten.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
There's a math, the name is escaping me right now, but there's a math program that builds in kind of students working at their own pace. So the teacher makes little instructional videos that are real short, quick little lessons. The student watches those, practices, gets feedback, and then in order to progress, they have to pass a little short, again, keyword, a little assessment that shows. And so they can like track their progress. It's very individualized. So I'm not waiting on Johnny to get it also, right? It's and it's kind of self-paced. Does anybody know the name of that one? I can't remember.
Are you talking about the Modern Classrooms project? Or are you
I
talking about something
am
different?
the Modern Classrooms project. Yes. I'm very intrigued by that one, but I haven't looked into it. Monica says turn one assessment into a game, build in some relationship building. I like that one. Yes. Gamatize it.
Yeah, we tried
okay.
to do sorry.
No, go ahead.
We tried to do like a math basketball kind of thing. And one of the classes was like, oh, we should turn it into real basketball. So they'd like run over, solve a problem, and then go and shoot a basket. And I tried it with this class, and it just completely fell apart because the kids kept running off and trying to play basketball, just normal basketball, and no one could sit still. And then other classes started coming in and sharing the gym, and just it was chaos. So I've kind of like, I haven't touched the games in a while, but I would like to get back into that. Absolutely.
Nice.
Have you
Yeah, you
also
could
tried
move
like
on.
test?
Hmm.
Well, one more thing. I was thinking, have you
Yeah.
tried test corrections? So the students correct their work and then they see it and then you retest.
I've done retests where like I went through the whole test with them kind of as a class, and we kind of worked through it problem by problem, and then I let them do a retake. But I didn't necessarily have them correct it individually. and then do the retake. We kind of did it as a class.
You could do just the video piece on the stuff that you're going to move on from so that the folks who don't have it can go back and watch the videos and get it and then move on for everyone else. That's another idea.
For sure.
So
there's
imagine this protocol, but with a proper amount of time, right? Which we will make sure we have for future sessions. It is really powerful to share your experience and then get some questions and some suggestions and ideas, especially as we continue working through our other topics. So just kind of keep that kicking around in the back of your mind. It's a great protocol. So sorry, we're running out of time. I just wanted to point out the resources here. There is a link for more ungrading resources. There's a whole podcast series about it. And then here's a book, Ungrading, Why Rating Students Undermines Learning. So there's tons of good stuff here. Here's the slides and the recordings from session 1 if you missed it or you want to watch it again. And then next time, we're going to start digging into rubrics, which is a hot topic. There's a lot to say about it. You may have some experience with rubrics, so bring that experience so that we can build from it. We can all learn from it. Same time, same Zoom link. Yeah, bring examples of rubrics and pick one of those 2 articles to read. And then there's the exit ticket. If you could, we just had a small handful fill it out last time. If you could take just a couple of minutes to fill it out, that really kind of helps us process what we did and how we can make it better each time. We really want it to be very useful time for you, and you're getting what you need from it. So sorry for keeping you a couple of minutes. Thank you for coming today. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you. Stop sharing.